all people have dignity, all people deserve to have access to things like healthcare, their basic human rights met. All people deserve to live with their families and their loved ones without fear.
I'm Kaylin Brandt, and you are listening to Our Stories, Our World. This podcast series, led by young people like me, features Chicago stories about public health, public safety, and public education. Each episode uses the power of a single personal photo to spark a conversation about what matters to our guests. The theme of this episode is public health. Taneka Jennings is a community activist for adoptee and immigrant rights. When Taneka attended a Citizenship for All protest at the U.S. Capitol in 2017, she was thinking about the way that citizenship determines who has access to basic human rights in this country, including healthcare. She was prepared to be arrested that day, a risk that undocumented protesters couldn't afford.
My name is Taneka Jennings. My pronouns are she, her, and then I live in the Humboldt Park neighborhood in Chicago. This photo is of a cloudy, gloomy day in Washington, D.C. On the left-hand side, you can see a police officer, a white police officer, wearing a cap and police officer garb, and then a young Black woman with an afro who is facing the police officer. And then immediately, if you scroll to the right, there is an older Korean American woman with silver, gray, and black hair, smiling, facing the camera in the foreground, wearing a set of red spectacles and a pink puffy down jacket. And then next to the older Korean American woman, you can see a somewhat younger Korean American woman with black hair and a hoodie, a black hoodie, and the hood is up. And then she's wearing some kind of bandana over her head. And she has a fist slightly raised in the air. And she's wearing a black jacket with gray gloves. And then to the right, all the way in the background, you can see the U.S. Capitol building. So the younger woman on the right, wearing a bandana with a hoodie and a fist raised, is me. There's also a green bandana that's showing, and I was actually wearing that around my right arm to signify that I was choosing to be arrested that day. Next to me is my friend. Her name is Janet, and she is a Korean adoptee, just like me, and she also chose to be arrested that day. This photo was taken in December 2017 as part of a Citizenship for All demonstration led by many national and local organizations. And I think there were about 20,000 people there who were protesting and marching for Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship for all and 11 million undocumented immigrants. It was freezing. It was really cold, and it was just, there was no protection from the wind. I was actually a little concerned about getting hypothermia because the way that they arrested us, since there were so many of us, they made these little holding cells outside. So they were just outside and we had to wait in them for hours. And I remember that I wasn't wearing boots. And so my feet were really cold and my jacket wasn't warm enough. I remember being a little anxious, maybe, just not knowing what was going to happen. They didn't tell us what would happen once they arrested us. I was just thinking about people that I knew who didn't have citizenship, and that it's so ironic that it could be a privilege to choose to be arrested. It was just a very emotional moment. And I think I was realizing that I was growing, even in that moment, in my understanding of of all of these things. And I think I was also glad to just have a friend like Janet who was there with me, an older friend too, someone with more life experience. I think it probably felt a little comforting. But I realized how small that decision was and how in the grand picture it doesn't really matter, but that it was more meaningful probably for me and maybe for a few people that I know. One decision by an individual person doesn't change a whole policy, but again, when we all do those things together, that's the power for change. As a Korean adoptee, I came, to this country not of my own free will, but because I was brought here. And immigration is really complicated, but if you really think about it logically, people don't leave the country that they live in to go live in another country unless there's extenuating circumstances, usually. Not many people have the privilege to move around as they please just because they choose to. And so citizenship for all to me represents my own journey, but also the larger community that I'm part of, which is very diverse with so many different lived experiences, racial, ethnic groups, reasons that people are in the United States. But at the end of the day, it's really about the fact that all people have dignity, all people deserve to have access to things like healthcare, their basic human rights met. All people deserve to live with their families and their loved ones without fear. And I think about how much privilege I have in this country and the fact that even I've gone without healthcare because the times I worked at jobs that didn't have healthcare, I just didn't have it. And I think about the times when I was in pain and had to go to the emergency room at the Cook County hospitals and wait a long time. And I wasn't sure if I'd be able to get the care I needed. When it comes to public health, it's just that, right? It's the health of the public. And I really hope we can move towards a reality and a future vision and world where we truly believe and act on our beliefs with our policies and with the systems that we set in place, that healthcare is not something that should be made available to some people, where some people are making a profit and other people don't have access to it at all, but that we can really shift our policies, our systems with our values to be a world where all people have access to this basic human right. To me, everything in life is intersectional. No one human right or no one policy issue like public health, public education can be separated from others. It's all about what are the basic human rights of every human being that we should all as people agree on. And to me, public health is one of those basic human rights, whether we're talking about right now, access to COVID vaccines or not living in fear of COVID if we shouldn't have to, because we're all, as the public, we're all exercising responsibility and protecting each other by following, CDC guidance. Or if you're talking about just on a regular day-to-day basis, having access to healthcare. No matter what your documentation status is, no matter what amount of money you have, those things shouldn't dictate whether or not you have access to reliable and, good quality healthcare. Neither should your race, your gender, your age, all these things we know. But in reality, all of these things play a big part in whether or not, we get good healthcare or healthcare at all in this country.
This has been Our Stories, Our World, a limited podcast series created by Chicago youth. Our Stories, Our World is brought to you by Public Narrative and APicture'sWorth, two nonprofits focused on community building and narrative change. Thanks to Taneka Jennings for sharing her story, and to our story gatherer Kaylin Brandt for interviewing and hosting. Our music was created by Chicago artist Malky. Our podcast artwork is by Dan McDonald Studios. Our audio producer is Brooklyn's own Samantha Gatzek. The executive producers of Our Stories, Our World are Alyssa Yancey and Mareva Lindo. That's me. Find our other episodes and detailed notes at APicture'sWorth.org/public narrative. If you enjoyed this episode, We hope you'll share it and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Support our work by making a donation at publicnarrative.org/donate. Tune in again in 2 weeks for the next episode of Our Stories, Our World. Thank you for listening.